Hi guys, Brain here, and welcome yet again to another commentary video. I know, there's been a lot of these this week. You guys remember I used to do this 7 days a week. How did I find enough topics to talk about? I'm so glad we do the React stuff, because like, React stuff brings in topics that I never would have thought of. But I used to do that 7 days a week, man. Wild. I love having variety content. Crazy, absolutely crazy. But anyways, I had another thought this week. Yeah, I'm all out. I'm getting that topics back. I'm in the topics back in my brain. It's like old brain is revving the commentary. But anyways, that ran aside. I want to talk about something that I've kind of noticed. It took me a while to notice, because it technically, the thing that happened before my time in DBD, before I started playing. But I kind of noticed the other day, you know, a lot of people talk, a lot of veterans in DBD talk about how the game has felt stale. The game doesn't feel like it's had any major changes. And I say to myself, like, oh, well, there's been like huge meta shakeups. There's brand new maps, brand new characters. But they say like the main gameplay loop is what has not changed. The way the game actually plays has not changed. And I thought to myself, they're right, because like I started playing in May of 2020, and in the 3 years that I've played this game, you're right. The gameplay loop is literally the same. And when I mean by gameplay loop, which I should probably elaborate, when I mean by the gameplay loop, I mean like literally the stuff you do in the game. Killer is going for 3 hooks for the kill. The survivors are trying to do 5 gens, and then, you know, power the exit gates and leave. Nothing has really happened to that gameplay loop in actually 4 years. 4 years. So I'm going to take you back in time. We're going to talk about like the last like big change, and the fact that, you know, nothing really like that has come about. So let's go and talk about it. So the last time that the actual gameplay loop of Dead by Daylight was actually changed was back in 2019. It was between the Ghost Face and the Plague, the mid-chapter between those 2 chapters. And that was the last time the gameplay loop was modified. The modification that had happened to the gameplay loop was that endgame collapse was added to the game. That thing that if you open the exit gate, there's a set timer that will go down over time, and essentially puts you on a rushed timer to get everything done you want to get done in the match. Now, obviously, you guys see that, you know, survivors will 99 the gates, and what they do, the reason they do that is so that they can heal and try to go for the hook save at the end. And they have essentially all the time in the world to do this, as long as they've 99 the gates. So they, even if they mess up the save, you can go back, you can heal and come back and attempt again. And I'm sure you've been in that position in Killer and you felt pretty frustrated about it. Now imagine a world before endgame collapse where even if the gates were open, they can just continue to do that with like literally 0 reprieve. Obviously, that was a very frustrating and annoying thing. So obviously they put in a set timer that at least if the exit gates are open, you have to get out at some point. You have a set timer, you gotta go. So if they screw that up over and over, they get punished for it. If they screw up their endgame save, they actually, you know, really get punished for it. And that was the last time that DBD actually had any sort of like huge change to the gameplay cycle. There's been no early game collapse. There's been no change to the main flow of the game. Essentially, everything has been the same since 2019, which is, you know, they've updated, you know, the maps and they've shifted around the meta. But like in general, like in terms of like what you're actually physically doing in Dead by Daylight, the game has quite literally never really changed since that point 4 whole years ago. Behavior has tried to kind of implement different gameplay elements to the game. That's kind of what the closest thing we kind of had to any sort of alternative gameplay loop or like something that adds to the gameplay loop was boons. Boons were kind of like the inverse of hexes, to try and give survivors some sort of like alternate objective to do. But once again, those are ultimately just tied to perks and really are just more perks that have been added to the game. Just like hexes technically aren't really like, hexes have been in the game forever and aren't really technically part of the gameplay loop. They're just an optional thing you can do as part of perks. Boons kind of became the same thing because there's no inherent way to put down a boon unless you bring the perks. So it essentially just became another, you know, section of perks that's just another pile of perks, similar to like another good example, Scourge Hooks. Scourge Hooks, you know, added something to like the hook cycle, but obviously those are still also relegated to perks. There's nothing special inherently to the game unless you bring an actual Scourge Hook to the game that changes the hooks or anything like that. So even those things that, you know, I would believe would be like the best attempts at kind of changing the natural game flow of the game aren't really mechanics or anything that changes at base and are still something that you have to bring perks tied to. So the game really hasn't changed in its main gameplay loop in like 4 whole years. So when you hear a veteran or someone in Dead by Daylight talking about like, well, the game's really, really boring and I feel like the game hasn't changed in a while, technically they're right. like technically they're right. Technically, there has been no additions to the main gameplay loop of the game in literally 4 whole years. So I can imagine that for somebody that, you know, played through that time where the game was being updated and they were trying to, you know, perfect the formula, just suddenly, you know, for years and years and years, you stop receiving any sort of changes or updates to the game. I can see how you could perceive the game as being kind of stale and, or you know, falling behind because they haven't made any modifications like that in a really, really long time. I think in general, the gameplay loop of Dead by Daylight is fine enough. But obviously, you know, always working to innovate and improve is something that's, you know, very, very important in any video game, not just Dead by Daylight. So the fact that they've not even like really tried to really do that in a long time is like the big thing that they tried to do was the making the Moris base. I feel like that's like the true closest thing we've gotten to that. And somebody's probably already written down in the comments because like it took me till the end of the video to say that. But yeah, the base kit unbreakable and Mori change is probably the biggest thing we've had, more so the Mori instead of being an offering, being a part of the normal gameplay cycle. But obviously we saw that didn't actually really work out because what happened is really, really strong characters were already strong, like Blight and Nurse, were able to just like 4-man slug people so quickly that they were just going into the instant Mori and winning the games even quicker than they normally would. Whereas like, you know, weaker characters like Myers and Trapper, if they slugged anybody at all, they just get right back up. And essentially there was this whole gameplay cycle of slugging, which was just now no longer available to the weaker killers in the game that often used it to catch up because of the weakness of their base kit. So it punished weak killers and rewarded killers that were already way too strong. So the behavior said nothing about that. We did that one test that one weekend a long time ago. They've not given us updates on it, which leads me to believe that they're just kind of going to leave that in the dust. That's just never going to come back. And the way it was implemented was not very good, so I can see why. But yeah, I feel like for a lot, especially the veteran players, maybe something that's actually like fruitful and good, actually, you know, mix up the gameplay cycle would be nice. Especially since I feel like behavior doesn't really do a lot in the way of bringing veterans back, like people with like twice the hours that I do, people that played the game since the beginning. A lot of them are disenfranchised and have left the game, and they don't really seem to care too much about bringing those characters back or retaining the people that really are struggling right now with enjoying the game, that have played the game for a long time. So I feel like something like this to make the game feel a little bit more fresh would probably be nice. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. But that's gonna be it for today's video, friends. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate y'all, but I do upload daily, so I will see you tomorrow. But if I do not, well, you know, I'll see you when I see you. Goodbye.